Hello and welcome. My name is Randy Bell, and I am the director of the Global Energy Center at the Atlantic Council. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the first of 4 special events that the Atlantic Council is hosting virtually as part of Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. We were supposed to be in Abu Dhabi this week for our annual Global Energy Forum, which is part of Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, but due to the COVID case numbers in the US and Europe, we decided to postpone until March 28th and 29th. We'll have more information on the plan for the forum in March in the coming weeks. Today, we have 2 very special programs for you. The first, projecting COP ambitions across COP27 and COP28, is a discussion with His Excellency Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber, the UAE's Special Envoy for Climate Change, the Right Honorable Alok Sharma, the President of COP26, and His Excellency Sameh Shoukry, Egyptian Minister of Foreign Affairs and the President of COP27. Atlantic Council CEO Fred Kemp will moderate. After that, we will have a fireside chat with Musaba El-Kabi, the CEO of UAE Investments at Mubadala Investment Company, and he'll discuss economic diversification and lessons learned from the pandemic. But first, we will go to the COP27 and COP28 discussion. Over to you, Fred.
Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today, wherever you are in the world, for this global event. I'm Fred Kemp. I'm President and CEO of the Atlantic Council, and it is my pleasure to be moderating this event as part of the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center's engagement in Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. Against the backdrop of a global pandemic, the 26th United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or COP26 as it's better known, was a long-awaited display of increased global cooperation on the climate crisis. It disappointed some, but at the same time signaled that the necessary forces for progress, namely and most importantly the mobilization of financing, are moving in the right direction. However, the success of future COPs relies on sustaining the momentum of those past in identifying pathways forward for the social, environmental, and economic well-being of the global community. Think of it as a sort of relay race for the future. And we have 3 individuals here, very important individuals, passing the baton to each other. I'm delighted to have this group of speakers with me today to discuss the post-COP26 climate agenda, particularly what's to come for COP27 in Egypt and Sharm el-Sheikh, and COP28 in the United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi. So it's my pleasure first to welcome the Right Honorable Alok Sharma, President of the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference, and he was previously a Secretary of State for Business, Energy, and Industrial Strategy. His Excellency Sameh Shoukry, Minister of Foreign Affairs and President of the 27th United Nations Climate Change Conference for the Arab Republic of Egypt. And as I said, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and His Excellency Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber, the UAE's Special Envoy for Climate Change and Minister for Industry and Advanced Technology. So thank you very much to you all. We're looking forward to your comments. This is a very unique and rare situation to have 3 individuals in charge of 3 such important parts of the COP process. So a couple of months have passed since Glasgow. I was lucky myself to be there and enjoy the Scottish hospitality. What I'd like to ask each of you is to give a brief review of COP26. What did it accomplish? Where did it fall short? So Mr. Sharma, let me start with you.
Well, thank you, Fred. And firstly, big thanks to the organizers of the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week for this event. We were very clear. We set out very early on in our presidency what we wanted to achieve out of COP26. And our overarching ambition was to ensure that we kept 1.5 alive. And what, of course, that means, the audience will know, is that the Paris Agreement said that world leaders should work together to limit global temperature rises to 2 degrees and aiming for well below that, aiming towards 1.5. And that's why keeping 1.5 alive was so important for us. And The way that we were very keen to deliver that was to get much more progress on emission reduction commitments, on finance to support developing nations, on getting support for adaptation, and then, of course, to close off the outstanding elements of the Paris rule book so that that could be operationalized. I do think collectively what we managed to do is to keep 1.5 alive. If you look at before Paris, the world was heading towards 4 degrees of global warming by the end of the century. After the commitments at Paris, it was around 3 degrees. And now, if you take all the commitments that were made in the lead up to COP26, we are heading to below 2 degrees. So we kept 1.5 alive. And I would just say that actually we do live in a fractured world in terms of politics. And yet we had almost 200 countries coming together and ensuring that we were tackling this global problem together. So I think we can all collectively be very proud of what we achieved in terms of Glasgow Climate Pact. And just to sort of highlight some of the key issues that came out, we want to ensure that we were moving towards a net zero world. When we took on this role, less than 30% of the global economy had a net zero commitment. We're now at over 90%. We've got a commitment for countries to phase down coal use, the first time ever in any of these COP processes. We've ensured that the 100 billion funding will be delivered by 2023, maybe earlier, and indeed developed countries agree to double the amount of adaptation finance to support developing countries. And we've got various work programs in place as well on driving action on adaptation, on loss and damage. So, I would say that what we achieved is small, but I also said in Glasgow that this is a fragile win. And that's because we now need to spend the coming years ensuring that all of these commitments are translated into action. And that, frankly, is what the world demands, and that's what all our populations demand.
Thank you very much for that very terse but very interesting answer. Kept 1.5 alive, 90% moving to 90%. That's 0 countries, but also a fragile win. I think that was also a good way to put it. So, Minister Shokri, could you reflect also on COP26, and then Dr. Sultan after that? Both of you were there. I saw Dr. Sultan there. We did things together. Mr. Shokri, perhaps you could start.
Thank you very much, Fred. I'm happy to be participating in this event, and let me start by congratulating Minister Sharma and the United Kingdom on the success of COP26, both in terms of the substance and what was achieved. And I believe it was an important that COP26 was held after a hiatus of about 2 years due to the COVID pandemic and the lack of engagement at the multilateral level on climate negotiations. There was a particular need at this juncture to finalize the very last outstanding elements of the Paris Agreement work program. And we hope that COP27 will equally be successful both from a logistic and a substantive perspective. I think Glasgow was an important stepping stone in the direction we need to be taken on global climate action. That is to say, from pledges to actual implementation on the ground. So we need to be finalizing, and this was, I think, the main element in COP26 is to finalize the provisions on the markets, transparency, common timeframes for NDCs. There was an importance that there shouldn't be any further delay in implementation. What the world needs today is to focus on implementing commitments outlined in NDCs conclusively and expeditiously on issues of mitigation, adaptation, and providing climate finance to developing countries. More importantly, outcomes from Glasgow reflected a clear political commitment from all parties to step up climate action on all fronts. The call to submit enhanced NDCs to phase down unabated coal power, to phase out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies are all steps in the right direction. In addition, we are also very encouraged by the launch of the comprehensive 2-year Glasgow Sharm el-Sheikh work program on the global goal on adaptation of the Paris Agreement, as well as on the initiation of deliberations on a new collective qualified goal on climate finance. For all of these reasons, we were satisfied with the COP26. Of course, there are issues pertaining to the developing countries' ambitions and expectations that we hope will be further developed in the subsequent negotiating process. But we recognize in the multilateral negotiating context, we should address, especially in view of the dramatic events of the last 2 years in terms of climate change and their impacts, that we need to move in the right direction with the necessary political commitment. And I think that Glasgow provided us the groundwork for future endeavors in this regard.
And thank you for that, Minister Shokri. And I'm going to come back to you in a minute to talk about COP27 and your priorities there. But let me first go to Dr. Sultan to ask him for his reflections on COP26. In your view, what did it accomplish and where did it fall short?
Well, thank you, Fred, for the opportunity, and thank you for giving me this chance to join you on this very important session. And let me start by saying hello and congratulations to both of my esteemed fellow panelists, His Excellency Alok Sharma and His Excellency Sameh Shukri. Congratulations to Alok for a phenomenal success at COP26, and for His Excellency Sameh Shukri for the recent appointment as the President of COP27. And as to your question, it is clear, especially now that the dust has settled, that COP26, in our view, was a very good stepping stone. In our view, it was a success. It helped instill the sense of urgency across the board. Glasgow united 90% of the world's economy on the path to net zero, and that is, in our view, a phenomenal achievement. The international community agreed significant global deals on methane reduction and forest protection. And of course, we got closer, if not the whole way, to reaching the $100 billion target for climate financing. COP26 also succeeded in launching many partnerships and coalitions between governments and private sector and businesses to accelerate progressive innovation like Aim for Climate, which we as the UAE are proud to be part of it. It was launched with the US, and 34 other countries have joined us in this very important initiative. And critically, COP26 finally reached a deal on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. That is, in our view, a very, very important critical success factor, because it lays the foundation for effective carbon markets. All of this creates great momentum and a great platform which Egypt and the UAE can, should, and will build on for the progressive approach both are adopting for COP27 and for COP28.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Sultan. Minister Shokri, Dr. Sultan talks about the great momentum and platform going forward. Egypt's proposal for the presidency, your COP27 presidency, was Road to COP27, a united Africa for a resilient future. So the word resilience underlining the move toward adaptation. Could you talk about how you look ahead to 2022 in November this year, and give some insight in what you're going to set as your biggest priorities in Sharm el-Sheikh?
I believe that COP27 will be very important in terms of setting the stage and direction for global climate action in this critical decade leading up to 2030. COP27 will be the first COP in what is, we believe, should be an implementation decade. The world's collective effort to implementing NDCs under the Paris Agreement should be stepped up, starting at Sharm el-Sheikh, to which all parties should be coming with enhanced ambition on all fronts of the war against climate change, whether in terms of mitigation, adaptation, or climate finance. COP27 will also build on the outcomes of Glasgow. As the COP designated presidency, Egypt will focus on achieving progress on the mandates emanating from COP26, including on the global goal of adaptation and the new goal on climate finance. The global stock taking also is an important part of the process, and progress should be made in this area in Sharm el-Sheikh to allow for assessing where we are and where we need to be, implementing the Paris Agreement and achieving its goals. The impacts of climate change are felt universally all around the world, and those affected most are ordinary men, women, and children, and their voices should be heard, and we will provide the opportunity for the stakeholders to be heard loud and clear and to have the necessary impact on the decision makers. It's important since their livelihoods are at stake, their well-being and that of their children is to be affected future generations. And thereby, we hope that COP27 will provide the opportunity for them to have an impact on the decision makers and what is achieved during this session of negotiations. We believe that strengthening the role of youth and civil society during COP27. We're glad that the first Climate Youth Forum will be convened in Egypt this year, and we commit to continuing to engage with young people around the world, and we believe that this is, again, an aspect that future COPs should concentrate on.
Mr. Minister, what a wonderful answer. The implementation decade, and also looking forward to youth, civil society, the stakeholders. Dr. Sultan, congratulations as well to you on the UAE having the COP28 presidency. There's been a lot of momentum in the UAE. You were the first country in the Middle East and North Africa to sign the Paris Agreement, the first to do a commitment to net zero in 2050. With this momentum of the UAE on climate and looking ahead to 2023, what will your approach to COP28 be?
Let me respond to your question first by saying that we take on this role with a great sense of responsibility. And as such, I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity to thank the Asia-Pacific Group of Nations and the UNFCCC Secretariat for the trust that they have placed in us. COP28 is going to be a crucial COP. It will mark the first ever global stocktake that will show us how we are tracking towards the Paris goals, whether it's on mitigation, adaptation, and of course on finance. Critically, it will also set the roadmap towards 2030 and beyond. The work towards a successful stocktake, in fact, starts now. And I can comfortably tell you that we have already started working very closely with our colleagues and friends in the UK and in Egypt to make sure that all countries continue the momentum of COP26, especially in aligning the international community around net zero by 2050. But there is also another dimension that we want COP28 to be defined by, and that goes beyond policy objectives to practical outcomes. We want Abu Dhabi to be where countries turn pledges into concrete results. So we want this to really be a platform that will translate policies, strategies, and plans into real action that will deliver real tangible results. And of course, we want to also help take commercial viable climate solutions to scale around the world, especially where it is really needed. This is why we want COP28 first to build on the momentum and the excitement created at COP26. We want to build on the progress and the momentum that will be achieved and clearly demonstrated throughout COP27. And we want COP28 to be as inclusive as possible, reflecting the views of developed nations alongside developing countries, also reflecting public and private sector's views, scientists and civil society. And what I mean by inclusive here, I mean the expertise that is required to help us cater for this very important transition. And mainly here, the energy space or the energy spectrum. The hydrocarbon industry will have to be included as part of the mix, because if we want to successfully transition to the energy system of tomorrow, we can't simply unplug from the energy system of today. And we can't do this with a flip of a switch. So we need to take time, we need to consult and engage all those relevant. We need to include the energy experts in the consultations and in the discussions. And we need to make the current system work more efficiently with much less carbon. And we should, of course, leverage the expertise from across the energy sector to help find meaningful, practical climate solutions that we all need. And as I've said before, Fred, we should always remember that our goals by undertaking these activities and these initiatives is to hold back emissions, not to hold back progress or economic development.
Dr. Sultan, what a wonderful way to end that comment. Hold back emissions and not to hold back progress. Mr. Sharma, you laid the ground for these two gentlemen through COP26. How do you see the UK working with Egypt and the UAE to capitalize on the fact that the next two COPs are in the Middle East and North African region?
Well, we look forward to working very closely with our friends in Egypt and the UAE, and I think it's been a very constructive dialogue with both countries in the lead up to COP26. My first international travel after COP26 this year, of course, is to Egypt and the UAE, and I hope that demonstrates the fact that we want this partnership to work really well. I've been so encouraged by what Mr. Shukri has said, what Dr. Rajaba has said about their ambitions for COP27 and COP28 as well. And there's no doubt that what they're looking to achieve is high ambition COPs, COP27 and COP28. And obviously that's what we had going into Glasgow as well, a real ambition for COP26. And if I may just reflect on one of the key elements that my colleagues and friends have talked about is also the power of the private sector here. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to get emissions down, and remember that if we want to be on that pathway to limit global temperature rises to well below 2 degrees, aiming for 1.5, we need to effectively halve global emissions by 2030, based on what they are in 2010, or were in 2010. And to be able to do this, we need to also get the private sector on board. And I have to tell you, over the past couple of years, and as demonstrated at COP itself at COP26, you saw the private sector stepping forward. We now have $130 trillion of assets from the private sector committed to going to net zero by 2050. That is absolutely tremendous. And what we want to see is this finance then moving into clean energy, into clean vehicles. And I think this is a really exciting part of what came out of COP26. And I'm sure this will be taken forward at COP27 and COP28 as well. Dr. Al-Jaber is absolutely right. Well, we talked about the fact that what we want to do is to get emissions down. And one of the really important achievements at COP26 was an agreement to have this ratchet, whereby every country, if necessary, is agreed to look at their 2030 emission reduction targets and see whether those will be revised by the end of 2022 so that they're aligned with the Paris temperature goals. And I think this is an area where we need to work closely together. As I said, I'm really excited about this partnership that we have with two very close friends. And I have no doubt, based on what I've heard from both of my friends, that they're absolutely committed to having real success at COP27 and COP28, and ultimately The aim of that, of course, is to deliver a cleaner world, a more prosperous world, and a world that is focused on green growth.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sharma, for that. I'm going to turn to Minister Shokri and Dr. Sultan for some final comments here with just a few minutes left. Obviously, this is a very special dynamic that we're going to have the next two COPs in the Middle East and in Africa. How do you feel the region can take advantage of this? And where do you feel most optimistic, and where do you see the greatest areas in need of work? And I know we have to be brief, but let me turn first to you, Minister Shokri, and then to Dr. Sultan after that.
Well, thank you. Our region continues to be highly affected by the negative impacts of climate change. And Egypt belongs to two regions the most affected, both Africa and the Mediterranean. And as COP president on behalf of Africa, we believe it is our responsibility during COP27 to highlight the priorities of the continent, which has suffered the most and which has contributed the least to the problem that we are facing. In this context, we believe that hosting the COP in Africa represents an opportunity to frame the impacts of climate change and as well to promote and support the exemplary efforts of the African countries that have been taken to address climate change and to adapt to their impacts in accordance with the Paris Agreement, despite the strains that climate action put on their limited resources. Nevertheless, we can also see that there's a silver lining in addressing climate change in the Middle East and Africa, expediting the green transformation to the benefit of our economies. We believe there's a great potential to take advantage of the resources that are available to provide green jobs and to provide opportunities and to generate the developmental ambitions of both the African and the MENA regions. And we hope that this process will continue to address those vulnerabilities that exist and the necessity to provide the resources for the countries most affected.
Mr. Minister, thank you so much for that. I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in Sharm el-Sheikh, if not before. Dr. Sultan, over to you.
I agree, Fred. This focus on our region in the next 2 years is, in fact, an important factor that we should capitalize on. This region has specific advantages that can help accelerate the energy transition from our position, of course, as energy leaders. Firstly, as long as the world continues to rely on oil and gas, we can play a very critical role in helping ensure reliable supplies of the least carbon-intensive oil and gas, and we can make sure that this is available to the market where it's needed. We're, of course, leveraging this position to drive down the carbon intensity through the expansion of many initiatives and projects, such as carbon capture and storage. We're also investing in our capabilities in hydrogen, green and blue. And as you know, Egypt have been very successful in developing a comprehensive, holistic energy strategy. And they are one of the countries that have access to high solar radiations as well as high wind speeds. And they have been harnessing both solar and wind, and they've been playing a very important role in helping advance the renewable energy agenda in an effort to help mitigate climate change and reduce carbon emissions. And in the UAE, we have been investing in the solar and, of course, wind. And we've been investing in the clean technology space for more than 15 years. We have invested in more than 40 countries. We today already have access to 23 gigawatts of clean, zero carbon emission sources of power in 40 countries. That positions us really uniquely on the global renewable energy map. And only recently, I'm sure you've heard that 3 of the UAE's energy giants joined in a strategic partnership to turn Masdar into a clean energy powerhouse. Now, this new supercharged Masdar is going to double once again its capacity to reach at least 50 gigawatts by 2030. This represents a very unique opportunity for Masdar and for its partners as well as the region. So energy transition has been embraced by this region, and in particular in Egypt, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and of course in the United Arab Emirates. We're very serious in advancing this agenda. We see a unique economic development opportunity that is sustainable for the future only if we were to capitalize on our deep energy expertise as well as the financial resources we have and the technology access as well as the partnerships that we've been able to create over the years. And again, globally, there is at least $3 trillion that will be invested in the renewable energy space over the next 10 years. That on its own is a unique opportunity. And we here in the UAE see this as a unique opportunity for us to capitalize on and seize with our partners. In fact, this is the thinking behind our net zero strategic initiative. We see it as a new economic development opportunity. It is an opportunity that will help us create new industries, new skills, new jobs, new partnerships, new models of engagement with relevant parties around the world. And for us, the business of tackling climate change is simply a good business opportunity. And as such, we are progressively approaching it.
Dr. Sultan, what a perfect ending for this inspirational and exciting discussion among a trio of climate leaders, a real trifecta. Dr. Sultan, your vision of reducing emissions and not progress is galvanizing. Minister Shokri, your call for the implementation decade, the bringing of youth to Sharm el-Sheikh is also inspirational. Mr. Sharma, thank you for keeping 1.5 alive. I think we all found Glasgow a real boost for our efforts to address all of these issues. Thank you all.
That was really remarkable. Thank you, Fred, for that. This group of leaders has a tremendous vision for climate action, and we hope that they are able to bring the world along with them, particularly this a decade of action. We're now going to hear from another great leader, Musab El-Kaabi, the CEO of UAE Investments at Mubadala Investment Company. Musab will speak about lessons learned from the pandemic for economic diversification, among other things. And he's definitely one of the people who is driving some of this action that we just heard about in the UAE and also through some of Mubadala's investments globally. Our friend Ethna Trainer will moderate. So over to you, Ethna.
Thanks, Randy. And I'm here with Musab El-Kaabi. He is the CEO of UAE Investments for Mubadala Investment Company. Thank you so much for joining us, Musab. Great to see you again.
Great to see you, Atna. Thank you, and always pleasure to be part of this conversation with Atlantic Council. I wish that we had the opportunity to meet face to face, but this is the new reality. But hopefully, we'll try. Next time, hopefully, it will be a face to face conversation.
We certainly hope so. And again, when I think of it, it's like a year ago at the Global Energy Forum, the Atlantic Council had spoken to you particularly about economic diversification post-COVID. Now, we're not quite there, but we're close, we hope. Talk to us a little bit about that, because we really did hope we'd be back in person. But when we look at that economic diversification and the speed, I suppose, at what it's happening, bring us up to date.
Yeah, well, thematically, we don't see a major change from last year. I think, as you mentioned, we are going through this pandemic. I hope that this is going to be the last wave. We see very encouraging results, very encouraging early indication that the year 2022, we might see the end of this pandemic and we move forward. But overall, if we talk about the economic diversification of the UAE, this journey started a long time ago, as you know, and we embraced a very clear strategy back in 2007 with the UAE 2030 or Abu Dhabi 2030 diversification or vision at that time. So we're down the road now. We're very satisfied with certain achievements, and looking forward to see more and more of this diversification. It's not only part of the UAE, it's not only within UAE, of course. As a result of this energy transition, we see it globally, and ESG consideration. I think there is a more focus in the region now to push the economic diversification stronger and be part of, I would say, a future economy where ESG, climate change, decarbonization is a major pillars of these activities.
Now, of course, you're in your job, the role of CEO to, about a year now. When we look at, the time you put in place, and again, it was a very challenging time when we look at, the pandemic as well. Has the pandemic affected Mubadala's investment strategy, so to speak? And I suppose, what kind of a year has it been really for you?
We think, as I mentioned, I think thematically for the Mubadala, we maintain a consistent view of the future. We maintain also a strategy that is forward-looking and anchored around few sectors that are enjoying a strong tailwind, of course. So as you know, that Mubadala is very focused in technology, life sciences, and these sectors, among other sectors, of course, are part of our strategy going forward. We deployed significant capital in 2020, despite the fact that was the first year of the pandemic. We achieved a very strong financial results in 2020, in 2020, and we believe that 2021 also will see a very strong year for Mubadala. So I think along these convictions with this strategy of forward-looking sectors, this is basically the pillars of Mubadala's strategy. I will give you one example. Itna is the Global Foundries. This is a semiconductor business that was acquired by Mubadala a long time ago. And we maintained a view that this is a sector that will enjoy fundamentally strong growth going forward. It is the year 2021. We saw 2020 and 2021. We saw a fundamental shift in that business. We listed the company in NASDAQ, with a very strong, growth going forward, and it proved to be the right conviction for Mubadala. So this is one example. I can give you more and more examples, but as an institution, we maintain a long-term view. We are a responsible investor, and that's dictate the way we see future activities. Now, let me double click on the UAE. In the UAE, we have also a dedicated portfolio. It is very diversified, and from energy all the way to technology, life sciences, AI. This portfolio of many activities, economic activities, is also part of a bigger ecosystem of the UAE economic diversification. We're very proud of what we've achieved so far, but we are, we're working with our, within the ecosystem in the UAE to push the economic diversification also going forward. So we upgraded a few sectors. One of them is definitely the life sciences, the energy transition through a platform. As you know, you're very familiar with it, is Mustard, the renewable energy company in Abu Dhabi. So it's going to spearhead and be the platform for the energy transition and renewable energy going forward. And the third one is the technology and advanced manufacturing. And Mubadala has a good track record of building certain sectors in that advanced manufacturing. So one example is Strata, which is a very advanced manufacturing facility serving the aerospace industry, Boeing, Airbus. And we came up also with an updated strategy for that facility to expand in advanced manufacturing. So hopefully we'll see more and more activities in these three sectors. Of course, the world is changing now, and with time, we may add, we may upgrade certain other sectors that would create local champions and hopefully serve the region and global outreach. So in a nutshell, I think our portfolio in the UAE is anchored around two fundamentals. One of them is the asset management of the current portfolio, but more exciting and more important are the new initiatives. As I mentioned, in the new initiatives, it's going to be part of an ecosystem to help and accelerate the economic diversification in the UAE and in the region.
So you've been kept busy for the last year or two, and a lot going on here. And again, it's a very exciting and dynamic time. And we look, I think, at that wide portfolio you have, but actually all interrelated in many ways. Do you think that countries of the UAE and indeed other countries should really be thinking now about pandemic proofing, so to speak? We've learned a lot of lessons, I think, in the last 2 years or so. But how do we actually prepare for the future if we could do such a thing as be pandemic proof?
Yeah, when it comes to, let me maybe highlight some of the how the UAE dealt with this pandemic. It was almost like a black swan event that in 2020 truly disrupted world economies, world communities. And the UAE took a very strong and practical approach. Of course, we introduced the right measures to protect the population of the UAE. The government and the leadership took all the measures to ensure that we will be one of the early countries to deal with it practically and in a safe manner. We are very glad and very happy to see that the UAE ranked one of the top countries when it comes to the way we dealt with the pandemic. I think, as you can see around you here, the economic activities are active, and the UAE is open again for business. We started this journey last year. In 2020, the total number of people visited the UAE around 5.8 million. In 2021, it was around 4.8 million. So it's a clear demonstration that the UAE is minimizing, I would say, the damage this COVID introduced globally. Now, looking forward, I think life after COVID-19 would be different. It is going to be different from an economic activities. It's going to be different also from a social. It's going to impact also life-work balance. It's going to impact every aspects of our life. So I believe that the world that we saw 2019 and prior is going to be history, and we are seeing a reset going forward. Of course, some of the fundamentals are not going to change, and we as a country we maintain a specific vision when it comes to the economic growth and the sectors that the country is pursuing. It's good to see that the UAE also made a significant, I would say, achievements during the pandemic. So back in 2020, we weathered the storm. We achieved a few remarkable historical events for the UAE, especially with the space exploration. And in 2021, also we continued the journey. We hosted Expo 2020 back in October 2021, and 190 countries are represented here in the UAE. The Expo, or Dubai Expo 2020, achieved 10 million visitors just a few weeks back. So truly remarkable achievement, given the fact that this is a global pandemic and many countries around the world are in a lockdown. Going forward, the government and the leadership decided that I doubt personally that we will see a complete lockdown, but I think we need to be careful, of course, and we're going to monitor the situation. We hope early indication from the Omicron data, at least shared globally, is that it's less severe. with less hospitalization. And hopefully it's going to be the year that we see the end of this pandemic. And, we got to deal with it one way or another. And we'll see more and more economic activities, hopefully, coming to the system in the near future. So I remain optimistic that 2022 is going to be the year that we will see more and more, I would say, activities and slowly going back to normal life.
Indeed, or whatever our new focus will be. But again, we are beginning to see that economic activity. And as you say, that sense of optimism, well, I think it's always been here because they knew the solutions in place. And I think everybody came together very quickly and decided what to do, did it, implemented it, and things are actually going probably as good as we can expect and probably better to plan. Let's take a look at the energy market here. And we look at energy prices, particularly recently. We've seen a spike there. Energy security, very, very important, of course, for the region and for what the UAE can do, for other countries and indeed for the world. But also we look at this energy transition that's going on here. So there's a lot happening together, still a player in the hydrocarbon space, but also expanding it. And when we look at that, transition, it's about driving sustainability, I think. How does everybody play into this to make sure that we focus on the energy security and, keep everything going together, so to speak?
Yeah, we maintain a view that the future energy outlook, there will be different sources of energy required in order to meet the growing demand for energy globally. Of course, we hope and we hope that we will see more renewable energy in the system, but we need to be practical as well. When you look at the energy outlooks from now until 2050, oil and gas will remain a significant part of that energy demand globally. The UAE, as you know, already announced carbon neutral by 2050. So we maintain that view, and we're going to work with our assets. All our economic activities in the country will be targeting similar target by 2050. But let me double click now on what's happening with the energy, I would say, landscape. We think because of the growing demand, and we see that oil demand in particular is almost going back to the level we saw pre-pandemic. It is a stretch in the system, and we know that there is a lack of investment in the oil side in particular. So I hope to see more, I would say, responsible investment in that space to ensure that we have a balanced supply demand. So this is something that we need to monitor for the foreseeable future. Now, when it comes to the energy transition is no longer something that is looming in the horizon. It's happening as we speak. We see it all across the world, and there is a strong and systematic, I think, drive to ensure that we introduce more and more sustainable energy and green energy in the mix. It's driven now by technology advancement, and the cost of solar, you've seen it globally dropping significantly, and also in wind power generation as well. We also see it on emerging trends like hydrogen, be it blue hydrogen or green hydrogen. There is a space for hydrogen to play a role in stabilizing, I would say, the system going forward and addressing some of the issues related to specifically renewable energy historically, with the intermittent issues of unreliability of the renewable energy. So, yeah, I think government policies, technologies will play a big role in the energy transition, and we're as a responsible investor as Mubadala, we have taken this on board. We understand this issue very clearly. We started this journey of renewable energy back in 2006 when we established Master. We are working with all our assets companies to ensure that they fulfill their requirements when it comes to the ESG and decarbonization targets. You've seen last year that one of our assets, Emirates Global Aluminum, is trying introduce a new concept called solar aluminum. So basically to ensure that we decarbonize that industry, which has historically been a very carbon intensive industry. So that's the agenda, that's the vision we're trying to push in the system and be part of a global force to decarbonize the economic activities in the foreseeable future.
And again, I think we're at a situation whereby there's almost a two-tier investment system going on, because we have to get ready for the future. But, you know, as I often say, we have to keep the lights on today. And just looking at some of your petroleum and petrochemical investments, you know, has the shift in the focus, has that impacted your investment, or are you looking at a more pragmatic approach that you have to do both for the time being?
Yeah, I think this view that the, you know, as I mentioned, we maintain our view that the future energy demand cannot be, there is no one solution fits all. Let's start with that. And I think there will be a requirement and need for other sources of energy. So again, we're very committed to the renewable energy, as I mentioned, through Masdar, and we're expanding that company to grow locally, regionally, and globally. But when it comes to the legacy oil and gas portfolio of Mubadala, I'll give you one example. Mubadala Petroleum is our upstream arm. We embraced a strategy to look for low carbon fossil fuel. And we have translated that strategy into action, basically by investing more and more into natural gas. So if you look at that company, it's heavily weighted for natural gas, with an aim also to play in the energy transition going forward. So they are working with like-minded companies. They signed recently with an IOC, an MOU to pursue and explore energy transition technologies, be it on the carbon capture or potentially blue hydrogen. So there are a few initiatives that will retransform some of these legacy assets to become more forward-looking and more ESG compliant. So as a responsible investor, we will work with these assets to ensure that they update their portfolios to become more and more ESG friendly, especially the oil and gas portfolio we have in our business.
Now, talk to me a bit more about hydrogen. I mean, it's very exciting in terms of what the UAE is doing, what it has announced, of course, looking at, having 25% of the world's low carbon hydrogen market by 2030. Ambitious aims, as always, but the importance of hydrogen in the energy mix, and what are the expectations? What are we looking towards for the UAE?
Well, as you know, that we have taken the agenda of hydrogen very seriously here in the UAE. We signed last year the Hydrogen Alliance. We collectively working with our colleagues from other Abu Dhabi entities to ensure that we maintain Abu Dhabi leading position when it comes to energy supplies. Historically, for the last 50 plus years, we as UAE, we were a reliable provider and supplier of energy to the global economy, and our vision is to continue to be a reliable supplier of energy globally. We identified hydrogen, be it blue, be it green, I think as a potential source of future energy. It is addressing few issues related to the renewable energy. And I think the ecosystem in Abu Dhabi and in the UAE in general will support such initiative. We do have the downstream facilities. We can produce electricity at a very low cost from solar power. And therefore, we think that, we have the right requirements, the right ingredients to push the hydrogen in the system and maintain Abu Dhabi position as a reliable supplier of energy. What makes also hydrogen attractive is the ability to transport hydrogen through few derivatives in the system, and you can export it east or west. And I think that's a big advantage. So yes, in a nutshell, it's the low cost of energy here through renewables. You've seen the numbers from solar power generation. We have the ecosystem and the downstream facilities to capitalize on the hydrogen through the hydrogen derivatives, be it ammonia, be it something else. And we have the legacy of running big energy ecosystem, be it in the oil or gas. So I think the Abu Dhabi has strong ingredients to be a reliable supplier and a reliable low-cost supplier of hydrogen globally.
And indeed, when we look to the future, as UAE is, definitely looking to the future, great news, of course, on COP28 coming to the UAE. And I think the focus on this region, even with COP27 coming to Egypt, but really looking at the UAE. And we heard just earlier there from Dr. Sultan, as well as Alok and Sameh, really talking about, I think the focus definitely for COP27 and COP28 as well. Looking at that, and looking at your investment strategy, a lot of focus will be on this region to, how will that shift or change, or will it impact, your investment strategy as the country prepares, particularly for COP28 in 2023?
Well, no, contrary, I think it's going to be a clear demonstration that the UAE is taking the ESG, the decarbonization, climate change issue very seriously. We're walking the talk. We're going to host COP28, and that's a clear demonstration that there's a conviction also globally that the UAE is definitely on the right track when it comes to these macro and important initiatives. The COP28 is going to be another milestone for the UAE, and I'm confident that we will see more strong and I would say bold, hopefully, move into a stronger commitment in COP28. Yet, as you mentioned, there is COP27, I think, in Cairo, and then COP28 here in Abu Dhabi. But I'm confident there will be, it is a positive note to the region and to the UAE. When it comes to the UAE, we are on the right track. I'll give you a few examples. Of course, as I mentioned, Masdar is 2006. It's moving in the right direction. It's going to be one of the leading renewable energy companies globally, with an aspiration target, as mentioned, maybe 100 gigawatt, potentially 200 gigawatt in the future. So that's a massive growth when it comes to the renewable. Now, in the country itself, we are, or the country already announced carbon neutral targets by 2050. It is the first country in the region and in the Arab world to have a very strong target by 2050. And it cascaded down to all the activities we see in the country. As I mentioned, there are some historically or inherently carbon intensive industries that we're also working with to ensure that we bring them to the right standards and commit the decarbonization path to 2050 and potentially earlier, 2030 and 2050. So to me, COP28 is a clear demonstration that the belief that the world believe in the region, believe in the UAE and the strategy and vision of the UAE going forward, especially on these important topics.
Now, of course, here in January in the UAE, we like to kick off the year with Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. But as we begin the year, and just before I let you go, looking ahead to 2022, what's on your big agenda? What's on the top of the agenda in terms of what do you have to do for Mubadala Investments in the year ahead?
Well, I think for 2022, as I mentioned, we remain very optimistic that hopefully we'll see the end of this terrible pandemic that impacted the world. And, I think when it comes to the economic activities, of course, we share certain challenges with the rest of the world, but we also see many, many opportunities. So to me, we will maintain our forward-looking views when it comes to the investments. We're going to invest in sectors and trends that enjoys a strong tailwind. When it comes to the UAE, I am confident that we will continue this journey of diversification. What makes it more interesting now, is that it's not only the UAE, but the whole region is going and trying, and of course, putting the plan in place to reach a certain targets in the near future. So it's going to be a very interesting year for the world, of course, for the region, and for the UAE. And I'm confident that we will hear and we will see more achievements and milestones for the UAE in the 2022.
Indeed, always a dynamic time here, particularly at Mubadala Investment Company, as you will keep a focus on the year ahead and indeed on the longer term plan. So Musab Al-Kabi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we're going to hand back to Randy. So from Musaba, myself, back to you, Randy.
Thank you so much, Ethna and Musaba. Hugely appreciate that. What a really great conversation. Wish we could be there in person again, but we will see everyone in March. I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today. We'll have 3 more of our sessions during Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week this week, all at 8 a.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Gulf Standard Time. Tomorrow, we will launch our annual flagship report, the Global Energy Agenda. Halima Croft, Francesco Lacamera, Maji Jaffer will be there, so please tune in. We'll also look at hydrogen on Thursday, and then the various pathways to net zero on Friday. These sessions are available on the Atlantic Council website, YouTube, and social media, so please do share with your colleagues. Make sure to follow us at AC Global Energy and share your thoughts using the hashtags AC Energy Forum and ADSW22. ADSW22. And again, please join us for the in-person Global Energy Forum in the UAE on March 28th and 29th. Thank you to everyone who helped put this event together today, including Olga Kokova, Iveta Kruma, Katie Kenny, Jackson Styron, Zach Tarrant, Bain Ennis, and Eamon Coughlin. We will see you all back here tomorrow again, 8 a.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Gulf Standard Time. Thanks so much.